We're going to start, though, with Manchester City.
Oh,
So they've filed this suit against the Premier League. Um, and they've also spoken out over their frustrations of the 115 charges against them. Let's
no.
start with the suit that they filed,
Yeah.
what this lawsuit actually consists of. So they're suing to, as kind of a brief explainer, they're suing to end the Premier League's associated party transactions rule. So what is that? It has to do essentially with commercial sponsorships that a club receives from a company that may have ties to that club. For
Right.
example, well, let's stay with Manchester City here. They're owned by a member of the royal family of the United Arab Emirates, and Etihad Airways is one of Abu Dhabi and the UAE's official airways. That would qualify as an associated party transaction if Etihad, which they do, has a sponsorship deal with Manchester City. It's kind
Right.
of like one guy has influence and owns pieces of both of those two things. The point is to prevent Man City from going to a sponsor like this and saying, "Hey, we're getting close to PSR violations. We need to boost our incoming revenue. Let's just do it through Etihad Airways."
Which
Yeah,
is basically
that
what they've
sponsorship.
been
Well,
accused
yeah,
of doing
right. A
and then
sponsorship that
lying about it.
a sponsorship that should maybe under normal circumstances cost 50 million for Etihad. Let's have that. Let's add a zero there. Let's make that 500 million,
Yeah.
and get ourselves back in better financial
And it
standing.
wouldn't be assessed as fair market value.
Right.
It would be assessed as inflated.
So it's a rule that's kind of been around for a little while. I know Newcastle, when they were purchased by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, the rule was, I think, reinforced. It's aimed, obviously, at trying to keep in check the loopholes that clubs like Newcastle and City could use to earn revenue. Like, this is actually, there's a lot of stuff that's very confusing with pertaining to the finances of City and Newcastle. This I actually think is pretty simple and
Yes.
pretty clear cut.
Yeah.
So now it is important to point out, and now we'll get to this because there's gray area. On the surface, this lawsuit, for people wondering if this is in some way linked to the 115 charges and that lawsuit, technically they don't have anything to do with one another. Now, like I said, we'll get to that. The 115 charges, we now know. We've been waiting. When is this going to have some sort of resolution? We now know that will be heard in November and will last roughly 6 weeks. I'm really disappointed by that. I was hoping that we would know something before the Premier League season started. We now know that we will not. That won't be until the end of this calendar year. So by the end of the year, we'll know something, but not before the season starts. This lawsuit, this associated party transactions rule, this is actually going to be an arbitration hearing. It's going to start on Monday. It's expected to last about 2 weeks. And so within the next couple of weeks, we will know if basically the Premier League as we know it will change dramatically or not. The Premier League, JJ, has to fight this with everything that they have. Because if the arbitrator rules in City's favor, then Manchester City and Newcastle, they will essentially be operating in a world where they can do pretty much whatever they want and not have to worry about the financial implications, because they will have this safety net that other clubs simply do not have.
Right. That's correct. And this is something that the Premier League either didn't factor in or just ignored or kicked the can down the road when they allowed City, a nation state, to buy Manchester City over 12, 15 years ago, whenever it was. They didn't see this coming. As Barney Roney said, they invited the tiger to tea, but never thought that the tiger might actually want to eat them. Because at the time, all they saw was huge, vast wealths of money coming into the Premier League. And why not have that? Of course you want the guy with loads of money in your club. Of course you want the guy with loads of money to be your best friend. And now it's coming back to haunt them because essentially, and what I've said all along is, like, this isn't Manchester City Football Club doing this. This is the United Arab Emirates or a member of the royal family. This is a nation state operating in this way. This isn't a football club like how we normally view it. And they have got unlimited resources. I want to take you up on something you said earlier, how these things are not linked. The arbitration that will happen next week.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I believe that they are very much linked. I just mean that they're literally not linked. Like this is a separate hearing. This has nothing to do with the hearing of the 115 charges.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, that's fair to say. They are not linked in terms of being, one is not a part of another case. But like, it's what I've been saying for I don't know how many years now, probably since 2018. Um, Khaldoun Al Mubarak in the Der Spiegel emails said that he would rather spend 30 million on the 50 best lawyers in the world to sue them for the next 10 years than agree to any financial settlement or penalty from UEFA. As the New York Times noted today, City's legal action is another way in which the club can muddy the process and attack the Premier League. This is exactly what's happening here. And we knew it was coming. It was the most obvious thing to happen. And the tone of it is just the tone of people who've never been told no. This is not the old school local butcher, local meat factory owner who owns the football club and is upset about something. This is a state that has unlimited resources and people at the head of it who've never been told no, who've never been in a club where the rules have not been bent or malleable towards their will. That's what we're dealing with here. So this was always coming. And it's a huge fight for the Premier League because
it is. It really is.
It's one they really need to win. Otherwise,
there's going to be a bit of a Wild West element moving forward if they don't win it.
Right. And again, it has been the Wild West in the Premier League for so long now, and it is very much trying to close the door off after the horse is bolted from the stables.
Oh yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
That is really the problem here. You are trying to catch up after waving in and welcoming with open arms nation states to own teams in England, and ultimately this is what you're going to get, and now they have to fight it.
So the way that Manchester City are viewed here, look, I mean, people who have listened to this podcast know sometimes I try to be not a voice of like support for City, but I try to talk about them in a more objective way. Sometimes I try to forget about, I try to sometimes just talk about them as a football club and not as this ownership group. And I understand why you and a lot of people can't separate the two.
No, I don't think Manchester City exists anymore as it did, say, 15, 20 years ago. It's just not the same club.
Right. And I get that. I understand that. The reason sometimes I approach it the way that I do is almost out of like some kind of sympathy with long-standing City fans. Like I think, what if a nation state bought the Phillies? That'd be hard for me.
Yeah.
But I'd continue to support them. I'd continue to love them, and I'd want to hear them talked about as a regular team like everyone else. I get why people wouldn't be able to, but I sometimes try to do that. And I bring that up because this is a situation where it is now becoming almost impossible to continue to do that. When I see stuff like this, JJ, right, Manchester City, they were commenting on this process, on the rules, this, to have for rules in the Premier League to exist, 14 of 20 teams have to vote a certain way. And Manchester City referred to this as the tyranny of the majority. And it's a phrase like that is so, I don't know. I find it so offensive.
Yeah.
That it is why no one can be sympathetic to them.
I mean,
like, tyranny. Tyranny is the like the kind of tyranny that has allowed you to win six of the last 7 Premier Leagues and 4 straight and a Champions League and a treble. Like the kind of tyranny that has allowed you to overnight become one of the biggest brands in all of global sports. Forget soccer, sports globally.
Yeah.
Like Manchester City fans, they sometimes get angry at the way that their club is spoken about. And I get that. Fans aren't making the decisions. They just support a team the way I support Tottenham, you support Liverpool. They just want to support City. But like when you've experienced the type of unprecedented success that they have experienced in this league, and you understand the way that they've been able to experience it, which is through financial avenues, like you can see how them describing all this as a tyrannical ruler with City positioned as the helpless commoner, even a City fan should be able to see that is infuriating.
Right.
But of other clubs in this league that feel that they have no chance going into a season to win a title. Like if Jeff Bezos described American capitalism as tyrannical, I'd raise an eyebrow.
Yeah.
Say, didn't this system allow you to become the most powerful businessman on earth?
City the tyranny. The tyranny. The rod on my back, Andrew. The rod on my back, the boot on my neck that has allowed me to win a treble.
Right. And City, to me, I see it as the same. It's offensive when I hear them say that this is that this is, tyranny of the majority. Now, to me, this brings us to what you were saying, which is the real reason that City are challenging this rule. It's not because this rule is inhibiting them moving forward. It's because they've probably been breaking this rule for years,
Yes.
and many of the 115 charges pertain to this. They now that we know this hearing's going to be in November, this is happening. Like they've kicked the can down the road with their team of lawyers, and they've pushed this into the future as much as they could. But we now have a date for when this is going to go to court. The chickens are going to come home to roost in November when the hearing takes place. To me, I see this as an act of desperation to boost their defense. If they can eliminate this rule, they know they've been breaking most likely for years. Then it helps them when the 115 charges are eventually brought in front of them and they have to answer to it. This is probably central to that, and they
Those
need this rule eliminated.
those charges have no weight if in the interim period between now and then the laws that underpin those charges are gone.
Right.
That's exactly what's happening
Because
here.
it can't be about the future. It can't just be that, like, okay, let's say that this rule about associated party transactions, let's say it goes away. And now we can sit here and think, okay, well, Manchester City and Newcastle, they're just free to do whatever they want. I know that's what I said at the start of the show. It's not entirely like that because UEFA still have their own set of rules that will also inhibit the amount of spending that a club can do. So I don't think this is just so Manchester City can go ahead and just buy everyone that they want moving forward. I think
No,
this is more retroactive. This is
no.
more, we've committed a lot of crimes and we need to make sure that the primary reason that those crimes are crimes, we need to make sure that that's out of the way and gone.
And
So
I
we
mean,
don't, so we're not retroactively punished.
and I mean, in the defense, the cry you hear from City fans is how well of a club they're run. They are, and they're. I wouldn't argue with that. I think the fact that they've invested in their, I mean, their youth policy alone has been brilliant. But that's all underpinned by money. It all came from money from somewhere. So that's the base of it. And yeah, great club, well run. Any club is well run if you're flouting the financial rules to achieve what they need, and they don't need to. Like I said, they've just done something. It's funny listening to Khaldoon Al Mubarak give his annual address to the City Nation, and it began with him saying, listing all the teams that in the past 100 years there were 5 teams that came close to going 4 back to back. None of them have done it. Manchester City are the only ones who've done it. And he goes in that quiet voice of his. And when you think about that, the sheer enormity of this achievement, and then he's banging on about tyranny. Unbelievable. And also the statement that they had about how they're defending, they're trying to stop this because it's going to impact their ability to finance their women's teams, and they went on and to talk about that. Like, it's real populist leader stuff. It's real, kind of what does a populist leader do? Usually a billionaire. He comes in and he says the elites are against you. They're all against you. Who's the elites here? West Ham United,
Right.
Sheffield United, Luton Town. What are you talking about? You are the elite. But the way to win votes and garner support is to be able to convince the people, he's speaking for me. Yeah, curse those elites. Could there be more elite than the royal family of a Middle Eastern country? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And that's what's so distasteful for people. And it's amazing to me, though, and it's part of the whole sports washing entity, because this is not just about Manchester City winning leagues. It's about positioning the United Arab Emirates for their future, the same way Saudi Arabia are trying to Project 2030, trying to position themselves moving forward as members of a larger, coming in from the cold, being members of a larger Western capitalist society. That's what this is about too, it's very frustrating because a football club is a pawn in all of this, and the integrity and the future of something we really love is being attacked by these elites who want to clothe themselves as the poor hapless Manchester City. It's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean,
I mean, just go online and see how they're defended, though. That was the point I was getting to before I lost my train of thought there.
sure.
Yeah, the sports washing part of it. if you can get and mobilize hordes of online City supporters who will defend everything that you do, that's powerful too. Um, and it's part of the whole project. It's very interesting to contrast what we saw, the protest against Rheinmetall's sponsorship of Borussia Dortmund, the immediate protest by their supporters. The only time I can think of City supporters protesting their own owners was last season when there would be ticket hikes. And again, something that they'll say they're threatening they'll have to do again to mobilize their base. Well, if we don't get what we want, we'll have to hike ticket prices again. You know, it's
City fans also, I think they were also against ownership when they were initially included in the Super League. Now they were the first to pull out of it from the Premier League clubs, but
yeah.
I think fans also went against their team
Okay,
for that.
we'll
But
give them
yeah,
those two stands that they made. But generally they are so pliant and complicit with this. It's it's crazy.
yeah.
It's to the point where you're like, yeah, maybe they do have a point. Maybe they are the underdogs, and
Well,
then
here,
you see the tyranny of the majority, and then you're like, no.
well, here is the only part of it that I do think about. Um, and we've talked about this before on the show with regards to City and Newcastle and any other club that would go this route. Like the Premier League does have a bigger problem here where you can call it parity, call it whatever you want, but like it is a league where it feels like there are certain clubs that were, to their credit, very good, great at a point in time where they became global brands
Yep,
and their financial wealth could then dwarf that of other clubs.
absolutely.
And as we know, the correlation between financial wealth and on-field success is pretty much ironclad. Like we can all see it. Like
Yeah,
it's not a coincidence. So if you're one of those clubs that is not a global brand, you basically have two options. You accept that you are what you are. You try your hardest. You win. Maybe you try to win through a cup, and like that's your route to success. Or you financially dope in a way that allows you to catch up with the global brand clubs. And like it's why I do get a little bit annoyed when fans of certain clubs complain about City and Newcastle, because to me that almost feels a little bit like we're at the cool table, no one else is allowed to be here but us. And so like
yeah,
that is a problem.
I know, but like Newcastle became a force in English football in the '90s by what they had owners who were willing to put money in, that's for sure. Um, but they didn't do it. Like the point for me is, oh no, I have a struggling team, or oh, I'll have this autocratic entity with billions, and they'll just super dope me to the gills, and then I'll go and win loads of stuff. Like that, it can't be this or that. And your point is right about Liverpool and Manchester United, who um, have had this kind of stranglehold over English football for a long, long time. And again, they became global brands at the right time, and it was almost like it was ridiculous that Liverpool went 30 years without winning a Premier League, considering the support they had, the financial backing they had, all those. It was mental, really crazy when you think about it. And I don't think that's fair either. But the solution should not be a scenario in which the only way to get to the top is through being owned by a nation state. A country should not own a football club. It just shouldn't. Like it would be grotesque for as much as you hate capitalism. It's bad enough having hedge fund owners owning these clubs. That is grotesque in its own way. It's another level of grotesque to say the United States bought Burnley. It would be awful, because Burnley would be then subject to every single policy that was dreamt up, every single FBI, every single army maneuver that ever happened. It just doesn't work. These are community institutions, and again, that's why the German model seems the right model. They no club should be owned by a foreign leader, by a foreign dictator, by a foreign nation. It should be owned by the fans, or at least
Well,
in part by the fans.
well, if we're wondering, then what does this all lead to? Like, I would say for the Premier League, going back to some sort of German model is far less likely than the resuscitation of some newly thought up idea of a super league. I feel like that is unfortunately a more likely outcome. to all this?
I think the outcome is, I actually don't know what the outcome is. I don't. It just feels like it's all gone too far.
Like
Um,
if Manchester City lose this, then what's to stop them from then saying, all right, then, you know, we're out and we're going, and now we're going to join up with, you know, Real Madrid or whoever. I know the Super League window just shut. I think the remaining clubs that were still part of it just disbanded from it.
but they'll never.
But
But like, I mean, you say
the,
disbanded. How quick? Look how quickly they put the website together. I mean, all
right.
you have to do is
Well,
just launch the website. It's as simple as
yeah, but
that.
as we found out, it actually does take a little bit more than just launching a website. You might want to
But
have a press conference too.
yeah, you might want to have a press conference. But like Barcelona in their economic dire need, and like even like Real Madrid pushed so hard for this idea.
Yeah.
Like they still want the ring fence um in their own problematic levels of greed. They still want to ring fence funds and be perennial whatever. Um but honestly, Andrew, losing Manchester, like say that like Manchester City being lost from the Premier League, like really wouldn't make a dent compared to some other clubs leaving. Now you can say what you like. It would be a huge moment, but um, if we're working on the basis that everything that City have achieved is inflated or grossly inflated from where they originally came from, which is a fair it's a fair argument to make. They shouldn't be winning a treble 25 years after being like in League One or whatever it was. Football doesn't work like that. Um, what would the loss be? I mean, supporters wise, they're very small. They're smaller than
But
some
it all
mid.
depends what the loss would look like. Like wasn't
The
the
loss would be the Premier League's loss of money that the 20 members of the Premier League have from losing a nation state, and that underpins everything. The Premier League will do whatever they can to fight City on this, and they'll also do whatever they can to make sure City stays. That's the duality here. We love your money, but we want you to please play by the rules. And you're asking royalty, people whose position in their country has been given to them, they say, by God. How do you argue? How do you debate? How do you even have legal arguments with these people?
well, we're gonna it's happening now. It happens through the courts. It happens through a democratic system. It happens through elected officials. I mean,
Oh, I call it tyranny, Andrew.
so that's Manchester City.
Yeah.
I mean, over the next couple of weeks, I'll be truly fascinated and riveted by how this arbitration hearing plays out because the ripple effects of it will absolutely reverberate this November when the 115 charges are finally heard and we learn more about them. I believe that there is a link and we'll learn more. So these next 2 weeks are enormously important for the future of the Premier League and obviously the future of Manchester City.
And before I finish, can I just say I do have a certain sympathy for Manchester City fans, not the online maniacs that accuse you of being racist or you
Oh,
know,
no, I know.
like
You're
for
talking
even
about normal
questioning them.
dudes who just like soccer and this team is awesome and like
So
it's they're supporting their team. Yeah.
there's a guy Fraser from Australia that messaged me and we were talking about this yesterday on Instagram, and he's like, you know, I supported, my family has supported City from like the early 90s. Like I'd like to go back to talking about football and enjoying the club again.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that every success that you've experienced, and this will hit American fans of Manchester City pretty hard too. You're telling them everything they've seen over the last 10 years that they've bought into, those fun-filled, sweaty day early mornings in the pub watching them clinch the Premier League. It's all nothing. It you know, how
Well,
do
it
you
depends. I mean, fans can rationalize, look, we've lived this in American sports with stuff like with PEDs.
yeah.
Like Mark McGuire's 60-second home run for a Cardinals fan, for a baseball fan. Uh, it's tainted, but does it erase the fact that it's one of the most unforgettable moments you've ever seen as a sports fan? You know, what Barry Bonds was doing late in his career. Giants fans still swear by those moments as some of the most cherished moments of their time as a fan. So City fans can choose to look at it, you know, they can kind
And
of
they
put up the
are.
walls around themselves and just say,
Yeah.
okay, F what everyone else thinks. We're in this together. Um, and I think that's kind of, and I understand it. You don't want the last 20 years of your life as a fan to have been a sham. Like, you know,
But
it
it's
meant
all
something
built
to you. And
I mean, it's all built on money. And like if you, I guess if you can rationalize the fact that, you know, at one point we were like relegation candidates every single season, and finishing 14th or 15th was a success. And now we're we're champions of Europe, FA Cup winners, Premier League winners, and 4 times back to back champions. Like if you can rationalize all that, you've probably gone so far that all this doesn't really matter to you, and it's just head down, City, City, City.
Yeah. And look, this is not meant as an attack on City fans. This is just one of the biggest things happening in the sport right now. And so, again, I'd like to hear from City fans on Twitter, on Reddit, how what you make of this. Are you kind of disgusted with some of the comments from your own club, or do you kind of are you gearing up for war like a lot of these Manchester City online fans have kind of suggesting they are?
And
I'd be curious to hear. No judgment either way. I'm genuinely curious as a soccer fan of
and I
how City fans are dealing with this.
and I would I would just have one extra ask before we move off this. Can you give us your opinion, your gut, your feeling, and not the kind of talking points that Khaldoon El Mubarak has fed people for the last maybe 5 or 6 years since City have been involved in this kind of litigation? Like, just give us your feelings. I don't want to hear about like, well, it was the only way to break into the top. I don't want to hear any of that. Just give me your.
Well, I'm not going to tell people to not to disqualify that from their argument. That's true though. It is one of the only ways to become a title contender in the current state of the Premier League is to sort of, like I said, financially dope your way into it. If that is one of the reasons, I'll accept that. I may disagree with the elements of it, but I'm not going to tell people not to say that.
Nah, right, okay. I won't tell people what to say. Say whatever you want.
There you go.
I shouldn't have a tyranny of the majority.
Yeah, wow, you are disgusting.